Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Microsoft 365 Business Boost. I am one half of your host, Therman Trotman.
And I'm Nick DeCourcy.
We're going to be talking about citizen developers. So we want to talk about what's a citizen developer and do you need one at your organization? We're also going to be talking about the types of things that your citizen developers should be focusing on. So, things like vacation tracking apps, expense management, like should they be working on that or something else? And then also per Copilot, which, everybody has Copilot on the brain. What does this citizen development look like in the age of Copilot? All right, Nick. So first thing I want to ask you about today is citizen developers. Big topic, hot topic. It's actually been a topic for a while that people have been talking about. But I want to know kind of like what you think a citizen developer is. I think there's an actual real definition, kind of. But I believe that definition has been put together and refined over the years. I want to ask you what you think a citizen developer is, and do organizations, small business in particular, do they need a citizen developer in their organization?
Yeah, so I think this is something, Thurman, that you're right. There's different ideas around how you contextualize this, and I think my ideas around how to contextualize this have changed over time. I mean, in fairness, I probably started my journey into what I'm doing now as a citizen developer. I was working in an organization where I got the opportunity to become interested in Power Platform. And that led me to a lot of what I'm doing now. That wasn't my only interest in IT, but certainly where I started off with those tools, I am not a pro developer. So on the flip side of that, I was a citizen developer. I was someone in a business role building out tools. But I think as time's gone on, my mindset around this is that actually, when we talk about citizen development, we are talking about individuals that are using low-code technologies to really enhance processes that they're involved in as an individual or maybe as a small team, and sometimes a bit bigger than that. But we're also talking about a culture within an organization of thinking about how do we get the best out of the processes that we're working through, and how do we tool ourselves appropriately in order to make that happen. So I think there are two pieces to that, but in general, I think you see people who are very much, their primary is doing a business focused job, whatever that may be. They've got something that they're doing that's outside of IT each day. And then as a sideline to that, it may be a small sideline, it may be a bigger sideline, but as a sideline to that, they're then starting to enhance the tools that they've got in order to do their job better.
Right. Yeah. I'm right along there with you as far as like it being on the sideline. So it's a fairly new term, citizen developer. Even though a long time ago, let's just say with like spreadsheets, you can do things like, put your macros in there and, learn these little pieces of code to help you do things inside of the spreadsheet. But I don't remember ever hearing that terminology of citizen developer back then when people used to do all these things in their spreadsheets, right? But it's kind of like that. It's like I'm a budget person, and that's what I do. I know money. I balance the budget. I move money around. I track expenses. I do all of that. Hey, what's a good tool that I can use to do that? A spreadsheet. So Excel. Now I'm in Excel and I'm like, all right, this is fine, but I got to level this up. I need something better. So you start to tinker with what's available to you inside of Excel. You don't necessarily call up a developer and say, hey, I'm going to pay you some big bucks to develop me this tool, because you can take care of it yourself inside of a spreadsheet. Citizen developers do things like that. If I need to define them, I would say they're not necessarily a professional developer. And I don't even know how to define that either, because a lot of people who know how to write code kind of taught themselves. You know what I'm saying? So I can't even say you are a citizen developer if you haven't had traditional training, because tons of really good developers who write really good code, they've never been traditionally trained either. They just learn how to write code. So it's a citizen developer, I think, is along the lines of what you said. Your primary goal, your primary focus at work is this thing that you do. It could be anything. You could be in HR or whatever. And then on the sideline, whether big or small, you exercise your smarts with these tools that you have available to you.
Mm,
Highly
mm,
likely
mm,
going to be something like Excel. But I, like you, got my start with SharePoint as a, I'll say, quote, citizen developer, because they call us SharePoint developers. But at the end of the day, that word developer, along with the word SharePoint, has always been shaky because you're doing a lot of configuration,
mm,
not
mm, mm,
necessarily development. You know what I mean? So still kind of shaky, but that's how I got my start. I was the IT guy, was in charge of video teleconferencing, managing, people who come in and out of the room, the equipment inside of the room, all that other stuff. And then anything IT inside of the office. Then they bring SharePoint on board and like, hey, Therman, you're the IT guy, so figure it out. And then they sent me to a week of training, and then the rest is all history. So I'm with you along those lines.
mm.
Now, what about having a citizen developer inside of your organization? Now that we kind of have like a rough understanding of what a citizen developer is, what do you think about business owners having them inside of their organization? Like, do you need more? Do you need less? What's your thoughts there?
Well, I think most organizations aren't going to, you're not going to be a business owner or a manager in a department and wake up one day with no background on this issue and say, hey, today we need to hire a citizen developer. That just isn't the way that this
Yeah,
tends to work. And
yeah, yeah.
it probably isn't going to be successful because it's to do with establishing that culture. And I think that's the key thing. I think the point that you made about, well, what are you doing when you're developing in SharePoint? Like, there's a lot of configuration, there's a lot of setup, and then you can get really deep into the weeds of the technology, and you can be
Mm-hmm.
talking about SharePoint framework, building your own web parts, all these different
Mm-hmm.
things that you can do. And there isn't necessarily a hard line at which you jump from one side of that fence to the other. But I think the important thing is if everyone is using a tool at one level and you're the person who decides to take a step up to use a tool at a different level to actually make that tool work better for you than it is right now, then in today's parlance, we're going to call you a citizen developer. And yeah, this is a new term. We live in an age where we love to organize people into different tribes, and so we have our citizen developer group. But actually, you're right. People have done this for years. The person who in an office of people who didn't know really how to use Excel beyond the basics, the person who went out to buy that Excel for Dummies book and learned a few extra things to make their life easier and then started to share that information with the people around them, they were a citizen developer. But it's
Mm-hmm.
all to do with, does your culture within your organization allow you to do that? Does it allow you to try out new things? Does it allow you to share best practice? And if you've got that culture and you've got that interest in doing it, I think those two things need to come together. That's where you can start to build this out. And maybe you have someone who spends a few hours a week doing this and you start to see the benefit of it. And so you ask them to do a few more hours a week on it. And before you know it, you've got two people who are interested. You've got a little team of people who are building out these little tools. And before you know it, you've got a culture of citizen development within your organization with a bunch
Right.
of people that you could define with that term.
And then you don't know where it could go because you're talking about the person who buys the Excel for Dummies book, right? Or even if we think about Access.
Yeah.
Access was powerful,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? And people were building these cool little applications on Access because they had it in them to be like, ooh, like what else can I do here? So buying the Excel for Dummies book or Access book or whatever, um, you don't know, like you said, that there's no hard line.
Mm,
So inside of your organization, you're not going to put out a job announcement and say, hey, we need a citizen developer. They're going to organically happen inside of your organization because the person who became the citizen developer, they didn't even know they were going to do that.
mm,
They came to, a lot of people work in jobs that they don't even like. You know what I mean? They just do them because they chose to do something at a certain age and maybe or maybe not it worked out, right? little did they know they had some type of affection for tinkering with technology. So if you like to tinker with technology, you can move over into being a citizen developer, and your organization will be better off for it.
Mm,
But you can also, there's a flip side. You know what I'm saying? There's a flip side to being a citizen developer, which brings us to our next topic, actually.
mm,
So it's like, what things should a citizen developer focus on in Microsoft 365 for a small business, right? So it's like vacation tracking, right? And you could build that type of app. You could build a vacation tracking app, you know what I mean, or an expenses management app inside of 365 for a small business. You can do these things, or have your citizen developers do these things.
mm,
Or, you could just go buy the tool that's dedicated to do something like that. Like literally manages timesheets and all your vacation. It's all integrated into one. Or expenses management, you could do that in QuickBooks, you know what I mean?
mm,
And
mm,
other types of apps like QuickBooks. So your thoughts on what a citizen developer or what a business owner should have their citizen developers focus on
mm,
or not
mm,
focus on?
mm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is an important topic because I think often the same people who are kind of frustrated by a process and inspired to do something about it can also be in a group of people who start at the loftiest ambition as opposed to starting at the ground floor. And I see this a lot. Look, I'm to some extent involved in a number of different groups where there are people who are starting off in this journey, and sometimes I will offer help and advice, whether that be in person or online. To people who are thinking about this, as well as the stuff that I do for businesses, I will do stuff with individuals as well, and
Mm-hmm.
often there's two the ideas to start off with are too big. Like, I want to build a system that's going to do X and Y and Z and so on and so forth, and before you know it, what someone is describing to you is Dynamics 365 or QuickBooks or something else. And to some extent, I understand thinking about it in that way because you're using a system and there are things within it that don't necessarily work the way that you want them to work, the way that's going to make you most productive.
Mm-hmm.
But the right way of approaching it isn't to throw that out and to start with something new, because you're losing the years of benefit that you've got of professional developers spending their time building that tool. So the right
Yep.
way of thinking about it is, well, where are there gaps? And where are the easy gaps to fill? Where are the narrowest gaps in our processes that if I fill that gap, if I have an automation that connects this to this, or I have something that tracks data that's coming in on a list and highlights to us if there's something that's come up in that information. These kinds of very basic starting points can be really powerful because it's about not just starting from scratch, but filling those gaps. Now, if you think about if you go through training on Power Platform, for example, think about
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft certifications on Power Platform. A big part of that is actually learning about what is already available in the Microsoft stack. Because Microsoft's own advice on how to build things is, well, start off with the foundations that we've already built for you. For
Right.
example, if you want a CRM, don't go out and buy your own. Buy Dynamics 365 and then extend it where you need to. Find those gaps. Don't
Right.
try to run before you can walk. So my thinking would be that you need to start off with the smallest possible project that you can do out the door that's going to help you to achieve a little bit more, as opposed to starting with the biggest possible project that you're probably going to get dejected and you're going to be frustrated with before you ever get anything that's going to really help anyone within your business.
Right. So definitely agree with starting small. The way I look at starting small is I always ask the question, what spreadsheets are you managing right now?
Mm,
Because if you can handle this thing on a spreadsheet, then we can level you up out of that spreadsheet. If I see your spreadsheet and you're trying to manage a full blown application, what would be a full blown application? Then yeah, you need to think about how we can take this out of there. It's more so necessary to do it like if you're already doing it, is basically what I'm looking for. If you're already doing it and you're already able to manage it on a spreadsheet, well, how let's see how we take that out of the spreadsheet. And will it be a big lift or will it be a small lift? That to me is how I find those gaps, those small gaps. And then I want to talk about training.
Mm.
Really good training is invaluable, period. If I knew me when I just became a SharePoint person, a SME, is what I would like to say. That was 2009 and it's 2024. If I knew somebody who had 15 years of experience with SharePoint while I was just now starting out, I'm buying my way through that gap. I need to know what he knows so that I can approach this properly. And that to me is just, you can't touch that. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like this experience is the only teacher. Everything else comes from experience. So if people who are coming up with things and saying things, it started somewhere with experience. So if I'm finding out that I got citizen developers inside of my organization, I'm like, wait a minute, you built this with a spreadsheet? Wow, that's pretty cool. Let's see if we can get you to some training, really good training. That's why I got to stress it has to be good because technology is, kind of shaky. Where if somebody would have came to me when I was a young SharePoint SME, right? And to your point about big gaps and small gaps, if somebody would have said, "Hey, don't do that. That's too big of a gap. Look for the smaller gaps. This is really where you'll shine with helping people out with SharePoint." I didn't know that. I thought I
Mm.
discovered gold and SharePoint could solve every problem. And I was 28. So that's a whole different story. You know what I mean? So if I had access to someone who knew this stuff at the time, then it would be great because I had the organization pay for a couple pieces of training, but some of the best training I ever took was training I went, looked out, found, and paid out of my pocket
Mm.
to find out more about SharePoint. So definitely to the point of closing those gaps, but let's start with those small gaps because I like to give the Gmail example. When we first saw Gmail, it was, if you look at it now, you'll say it looked like trash. But Gmail was just one thing. It was email.
Mm.
And then what did they do? They made it exclusive. So the only way for you to get a Gmail account was if you could get an invite at the time. So it's like, oh my God, I want to get an invite because it's just Gmail, right? Which was just email. But look at Gmail now. Go into your inbox now and look at what they've done over all of the years with all of this stuff, right? You know what I mean? You might end up doing that with your app, but you'll never know until you just take that first basic step, try to close that small gap to your point, and then get some training. The SharePoint help desk can help you with that, which I run. But I'm a big proponent on training.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think getting training and mentorship from the right people as well
Oh,
is really
mentorship. Yep.
important. Just because someone in your organization is in the IT space doesn't mean that they are an innovative thinker around some of these issues. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that you could run into of sometimes there's good reasons why someone who does want to innovate in the tech space will say this is not the right way of doing it. But other times this is not the right way of doing it is because you're working with someone who isn't an innovator.
Right.
And I think that's an important line. That's not to run down anyone. I don't think everyone needs to be on the cusp of innovating something new all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to get the right energy between you and whoever you're working with to have a relationship where you're building the right skills. There's lots of things that I've done throughout my career that are kind of in the IT space or pseudo in the IT space, where I've been told I'm going to break things by trying things out, not because that was necessarily true, but because there was an established way of thinking. about a
Hmm.
process or the way that we do things. And it can be very difficult if you're the 25-year-old, 30-year-old person who's just starting out with this kind of stuff, and you've got people who are more experienced telling you this. It can be difficult to understand which is which. But I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's one of the most important things. And this is why it comes down to culture. You need to be working with the people who are in that culture of innovation and doing better and trying things out and understanding that the first 10 flows that you create are probably going to break, like that kind of thing, versus the people who are, well, this is the way that we've always done it, and that's the way we shall always do it kind
Right,
of attitude.
right. And that the culture part is a big deal, because that's why I said really good training. Because if I train you, if I have a chat with you and you're talking to me about applications and all that, I'm going to give you what I know, no doubt. But there's more to it than just specifically the application.
Mm.
It's more to it than that. Who's in charge? How many people are in your specific office? Who is going to use this? Do you have the right relationships to get people to do this? Do you have the ear of the boss? Has the boss bought in? All of these things are super important when we're talking about applications that you're introducing to the organization, big and small. So there's certain things to think about if it's going to be a big move or a small. Like, what are you doing in your day job? Do you have time to do stuff like this on the side?
Mm.
Because just a developer alone by themselves will take forever to do it. And this is their full job, because any developer will tell you, I had to test, like you said, the thing is going to break 10 times. A developer is going to write code 8 million times before, give or take, 8 million times before they, they get it working, because its code is so specific. It's like that. You know what I mean? So all of those things are important. You can't just focus on the application. So I love the fact that you're talking about culture, because culture plays a big part of that. So yeah, man. I completely agree with the culture part, because culture could hold up a thing or it could like totally tear it down. Um, Now I want to talk about Copilot. I mean, we got to talk about Copilot. For the record, if you saw the last episode, I said that I would have a Copilot next time I came back in. That has turned out to be a lie. But don't you worry. By the next time I'm on the show, I will have a Copilot. Now listen, developers work heavily in low code, no code, as we already mentioned, right? In those kinds of apps. But Copilot in 365 is heavily integrated into those applications now. So where you're using natural language to build certain things, like, hey, can you just create me an app that does X, Y, and Z? And then you just go in there and configure it and, make it better. Copilot, does it hurt or help our community of citizen developers? Your thoughts?
I think eventually it's probably going to help to some extent. I think right now, and this might be a slightly controversial take on what's been built into particularly Power Automate and Power Apps in terms of Copilot right now. Unless what you're trying to do is the very most basic thing that you could possibly think of, it's not that helpful right now. I mean, it can do some things. I mean, it's interesting to play with to see where it's going to go. But it's it's very basic. And it's a different Copilot. The Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a different Copilot to the Copilot that you've got in Power Apps or in Power Automate, which are the low-code platforms that I think we're talking about here. Now, what is interesting is that those apps that we've traditionally built in Power Apps, for example, there's other technology through a new product called Copilot Studio to extend Copilot for Microsoft 365 that essentially gives Copilot and this is one of the confusing things about this is everything is called Copilot. So
Yes.
I'm even thinking about the sentences that I've just spoken, and I'm like I don't know whether anyone can follow which Copilot I'm actually talking about at this point.
Yeah.
Which it's lovely that there's one brand for this, but at the same time it kind of gets a little bit confusing.
Yes.
So within Copilot Studio, you can extend Copilot for Microsoft 365. So if you think about the experience that you would have there, potentially there are limitations right now on, you're working with your data in Microsoft 365, so you can see your emails, you can see your chats, but perhaps you have data in a CRM system, or you
Hmm.
have data in your finance system. And a big part of what you're doing in terms of your low code development right now is giving you the ability to bridge those gaps. Well, another
Hmm.
option that we're getting to bridge those gaps with exactly the same set of connectors and technology as we're using in Power Platform is from Copilot Studio, integrating that stuff into our general Copilot experience. So in the future, that may lead us to a point where you can get the app out of the way, or you can get the flow out of the way. You're not really thinking about that. You're just thinking about interacting with your Copilot in natural language, and you're able to do that thing or retrieve that data from this system over here right alongside the query that you're putting in, or the prompt that you're putting in that's dealing with that chat that you've got in Teams, or that email, or whatever else it is that you're
Right.
dealing with. So does that help citizen developers? I suppose it depends on what you're thinking about. What is the point of a citizen developer? If the point of a citizen developer is, well, I have a job to do and I want to focus on making that job easier, then the easier that we can make it to build out those tools, the better. But if you're talking about people who have invested a great amount of time in learning how to use Power Automate or Power Apps, but they're not wanting to make that jump into working with them kind of professionally day to day, then I guess you could argue that Copilot is maybe eventually going to make those particular skills a bit less relevant.
Yeah, see, now I think that Copilot is a long way from truly being a Copilot. How long that is kind of it's shaky, because quote long in our day, talking about technology, long could be like 6 months. You know what I'm saying? Who knows? Because if you give Microsoft enough time to really make Copilot good, it could be better in 6 months. It could be better in a year, but it could be great in 3 years. You know what I'm saying? And I think 3 years is a good runway for a citizen developer to learn that technology.
Mm.
And that's how you make yourself valuable. If I was, so as a business owner and operating the way I'm operating right now, and the client that I have, it's like I'm not super pressed, as we all know, to go get Copilot, right? I'm still without my Copilot. But if I was an employee embedded in an organization doing citizen development and had these tools available to me, I am begging my organization to get me Copilot. And I'm going to learn Copilot, how it can help me, how it can help my colleagues, and I'll be that guy. And 3 years from now, or to 6 months, whatever it takes, everyone is going to be coming to me about Copilot, because I'm the one who's been digging in
Mm.
and trying to figure this thing out. So even if Copilot is supposed to be, hey, everybody has a Copilot. Again, I get that, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But before that happens, and I know that my CEO and other CEOs are eventually going to have a Copilot, I'm getting smart on Copilot so that I can help those CEOs, so that I can help their business, so I can help my colleagues. That to me says no. Copilot does not make it worse for me as a citizen developer. It makes it great, but you have to make that choice to be like, all right, here's the threshold. Do I keep going left and say, I'm hanging up this whole citizen development thing? I got to focus on my job because now it's getting out of control, and I don't want to deal with it day to day in a professional setting, or it's really professional. Or, all right, it's getting a little bit more tricky, but I really think it's valuable to keep this thing on the side of me while I do my real job. I'm going right. I'm going to get that Copilot experience. So I think it helps.
And I
1,000%.
think the important thing to remember, Thurman, is that within this Copilot discussion, there are these different strands of what's going on as well. And everything kind of layers together. Like whether you have Copilot for Microsoft 365 or not, today you already have Copilot experiences in Power Apps and Power Automate. So if that's
Hmm.
where you're doing your work, And beyond that, say you've focused big time in on working with a particular system that you hold your data in your organization. Perhaps you've built your skills to a point where you've built a custom connector so that people within your organization are able to access that data and manipulate it in this third-party system with Power Platform. Because you've dug into that API and you've built out that connector to be able to help you with that. That foundation that you've built is not going to be for nothing, because that same foundation that you're using for whether it be flows or apps over here, you can also use for Copilot extensibility over here. So
Yes.
whereas today your focus is, well, I want to build an app in Power Apps where my team members click on things on screen or enter things in boxes on screen to manipulate the data that's in the system. Maybe a year or two down the line, or even quicker than that, they'll just be doing that in Microsoft 365 chat as part of Copilot for Microsoft 365.
Right.
And so you have to separate what you're trying to achieve in terms of functionality to fix a business challenge that you've got from the interface layer that you're using to do that. And those two
Hmm.
things have always been separate, but
Yep.
now we need to think about that a little bit more, because you might have an app on top of it, or you might just have natural language prompts on top of it over here in Teams or in a Copilot interface, and you're not even worrying about building an app anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which to the CEO that I was talking about, the CEO might say, "Hey, where's the IT report? My IT team, did an inventory last month. They told me about an inventory because they came and briefed him or her at the office last month. Back from vacation, confused. He says, "Hey, where's the results from the inventory that they did last month? There's no app." Well, he's not interacting necessarily with some custom built app.
Mm,
He's interacting with Copilot.
mm,
And then Copilot should surface what he's looking for very easily. So that day is going to be here eventually. And if you are a citizen developer, you need to get in between that process, because your CEO is not going to know the details of that or how powerful that is. So get in between that so that you could be like, listen, it's like the people right now with prompts. They figured out that you have to get these detailed prompts and they have to look like this, and this is how you can, these are valuable prompts. So they're getting in between the AI and you to show you how best to use the
mm,
AI.
mm.
And that's my whole thing, is figure this thing out and then get in between the person who's going to use it and show them how to best use it. So definitely understand that day is going to be here when someone in the organization and the people in the C-suite, they're going to be interacting directly with Copilot, probably using their voice and not feeling like they need to, have somebody develop something. So,
Yeah, I mean, the day's going to get here, Thurman, where we're all just sitting there with our big Apple hats on, tapping our fingers together, talking to ourselves. It's going to be
yeah,
it's going to be a wonderful day. I'm really looking forward to that.
yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be different for our kids. For me, I'm willing to ride out in the sunset with what we got right now and a little bit more. This new stuff with connecting to your brain and changing reality real quick. A kid thinks what we think is not real, as in like internet and online, like in real life, is people and physical people and all that. Kids believe online is real life.
Yeah.
That's their real life to them. So it's like, well, where do we go from here? I don't know, man. You already know my thoughts on AI overall. Listen, Nick, before we get out of here, what do you have to promote? Where should people follow you? All that other good stuff.
Well, it's going to be an exciting week, I think, next week. It's planned, at least, that I actually have my first course on AI adoption. It's going to be focused for small business owners, small business leaders, to talk you through the whole what is AI, how do you go about adopting it within your organization, what are the risks. It comes at it from a Copilot for Microsoft 365 flavor, of course, but equally applicable to other types of tools as well. So that's going to be released in the coming the coming week or days from this release. So keep a lookout for that on my website. And if you're interested in finding out first when that goes out, sign up to my mailing list. There'll be a link down below for that.
Nice, nice. I love that. All right, good deal. So February is going to be pretty well, same old. I'm doing workshops. That's what I do. I love doing workshops, live workshops. So I have one on the 17th. That's a Saturday. I have one on the 21st. That's a Wednesday. And I have one on the 24th. That's another Saturday. That is, if you want the details, just come to my LinkedIn page.
You are a busy guy.
I'm very busy. The link to all of these will be on my LinkedIn page eventually, and then you'll be able to just sign up from there. So the first one is lists. So I'm talking about why spreadsheets can't hold up to lists. So Microsoft lists, SharePoint lists, whatever you want to call them, they're better than spreadsheets for data collection. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to tell you why. Then the one on the 21st is for the construction industry. And then the one on the 24th is also for the construction industry. So if you're in the construction industry and you want to know about some apps that you could build inside of your organization, or what an intranet could look like for a construction company, come on down. But again, you don't have to remember anything except one link, which is my LinkedIn page. Just go there. That description will be there. Everything I'm talking about will be right there. All right, good
That's
deal.
fantastic.
Yeah. Busy month.
Yeah.
All right, well, Nick, I'm gonna catch you next time. This was great as usual.
Great chatting
You have
with
a
you.
good one.
Take
All
care.
right.